So let's now move on to some bonus content. Yeah, bonus clips. We only had one bonus clip last week, the goal or no goal. Very much the deal or no deal vibe I got from that. But let's talk about...
Yes, and it was very much kind of playing down the goal way. Everyone kind of went for
Yes.
goal, whereas we kind of looked at the rules and said no goal. But,
Yes,
indeed.
So yeah, we've got a few. So Chris and I wanted to talk about. We were discussing the draft, and we were thinking about, all of these players that have started their 2021 their 2020/2021 season. We're thinking, like a lot of these guys have benefited from the fact that they've been playing overseas and started their season overseas and everything like that. We've had some more recent players or prospects being loaned to Europe, such as Arturs Silovs, I should say. The Latvian netminder is going to HS Riga. Dennis Mulgin, who was recently re-signed by the Toronto Maple Leafs, going to Lausanne of the Swiss National League. Joe Veleno of the Detroit Red Wings going to the Malmö Redhawks of the SHL. You've got Isaac Lundestrom from the Anaheim Ducks going to Timrå. Cole Sherwood being loaned to Kunlun Red Star, which is pretty interesting. Eric Brandstrom going to Langau. So we've got some pretty high value prospects and guys that have seen time in the NHL moving overseas still. We've got a long list of these guys moving overseas. And the question essentially I've got for you, Chris, is we've had the discussion and we've heard from the NHL that January 1st is the kind of the date where the league is hoping to start the new season. They're still hoping to have an 82-game season, which I think is absolutely ridiculous. I personally think they should go with, similar to the 12-13 lockout shortened season, go for like a 48-50 game season, something like that. That makes the most sense in my opinion. But I'm not the commissioner of the NHL, so what I think doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. So essentially with this situation, there's going to be two problems that arise, isn't there, Chris, with these players staying overseas. They might get injured. They might have a problem where they're not really gelling over there. They're not really adjusting. So they decide, their play kind of drops. And then fans kind of lower their expectations. Think, this player's a bust. He can't even play well in the Austrian league or something, for example. Or they play so well and enjoy their time overseas so much. Not so much for the North American guys that are going over there, or the highly touted guys that have played in the NHL over the last year or two that are still on their entry-level contracts. Those guys fully expect to come back to the NHL and play. But some of these later round picks, some of these guys that might reside in Europe, who have spent their entire careers developing in Europe and may have had a brief stint in the NHL or the AHL, either it's going to go that they're not going to enjoy their time over there, or they get injured and it causes them problems down the line, or some of these lower ranked guys are going to play really well over there and decide to stick over there for next season and potentially beyond. What other problems do you see arising with this, Chris? And do you think these problems are serious problems for the NHL? Do you think it's going to be a case of once January 1st comes round and it's like, right guys, training camp starting soon, get your asses back over here, let's have a training camp, let's get our team ready? Like, does it depend on the team and the prospect? Does it depend on if the team is a contender and they don't really have many roster spots available? Does it depend on if they're a rebuilding team? They're like, look, we have X amount of roster spots available. There's a lot of them. If you work your ass off and have a good training camp, you could be here. So it gives them more of an incentive to kind of go back overseas and see if they can make it. What are your thoughts?
All of the above.
Yeah, fair, very fair.
They could all be factors. I think, as you said, it's more the players that have been drafted and were based in Europe before they got drafted and are still in Europe now, or have gone back to Europe. Particularly if they weren't settling very well in America.
Yeah.
Then that is a risk that they might want to stay over there. And see if they are very much a kind of in the system player and not on the fringe of the roster, then it's not such an issue for the NHL side, because they'll just say, yeah, go over there and develop, fine.
Yeah.
But if you're on the fringe and all of a sudden you go over to, let's say, Sweden, and you're putting up loads of points per game, it's going to be tempting, because no matter what kind of player you are, all ice hockey players, they want to be out on the ice, they want to be winning games, they want to be contributing. And if they are in a situation where they're over in, let's say, Sweden, and they're putting up points and they're scoring goals, and then the NHL kind of comes back knocking and they say, well, come to our, leave your team for a month, come to our training camps, come to pre-season, but then we might not want you anyway. It is an interesting one. And then obviously the flip side of it is, as I mentioned earlier, for all these European teams to have players disappearing partway through the season.
Yeah, it's essentially going to be one of those situations. It's a double-edged sword that we've mentioned before, but also, whilst there might be a lot of these players that either decide to stay overseas or they then make the move back over to training camp. Obviously, a lot of these players, if they get told, you have the chance to play in the NHL if you come to the training camp, most, if not all of them, are going to be like, right, let's go.
Yeah.
Of course, like, where do you need me? However, on a more positive note with this situation, some of these guys might really find their game overseas, and it might have a really positive impact on their development moving forwards. Some of these guys that may have been, especially for these North American guys like the Bouchards and some of the other guys, like, they've been playing against juniors for most of their career. They go and play against men. They get that experience of what it's like to be hit that little bit harder or have to skate that little bit faster in order to beat some of their guys. And you have to, like, find those, get better at your intangibles and kind of know how to play the game a little bit better and refine your skills a little bit more in order to be an effective player. When they come back over to the NHL, that they might really impress the coaching staff and be like, wow, you've, like, really taken a step forward in your game. You've really developed, something positive has really happened as a result of this. Now, obviously, there's the flip side of what if they suffer a really bad concussion or they get a broken leg or something and they're out for a really long period of time. What if that happens, like, just before the NHL season is about to start and the player's out kind of long term or they're out, you know, I'm trying to find the right word, kind of like, oh, what's the word I'm looking for if they're out, like, it doesn't matter. But anyway, it's kind of like, it's one of those situations where you could argue it about, like, playing in the NHL as well. There's the chance that you're going to get injured. There's the chance that you could have the lucky bounces. It all comes down to whether you think it's worth your time, whether you think it's worth the risk, whether you think it's something that would be right for your career at this point in time. Because let's think about the global situation here, folks. Like, places are going into second lockdowns. There are other places that are really struggling. Some places that haven't got it under control to begin with. And a lot of these players thinking, look, I just want to go and take my mind off things and play hockey. I just want to carry on because while all of this stuff is going on, if these guys don't change with the times and don't get their ice time and don't get their reps, nobody's going to miss them when they don't make the NHL. They're just going to go, okay, well, we're just going to take the players that are NHL ready, or we'll just take the players that are drafted when things go back to normal, if they do go back to normal. So the only people it's going to affect at the end of the day is them. So, you know, if they're like, look, I want to go and spend some time, get like 20 minutes of ice time a game, refine my game. Yeah, it might be against weaker competition, but how's that any different to the major junior circuit, for example, where you get plenty of guys that don't get drafted every year? Maybe it's a case of, you know, we just need to look at it's a person-by-person basis at the end of the day, isn't it? Like, we've heard the rumor about a lot of these first-round picks of the most recent draft that we've obviously talked about so much in this episode. Guys like Alexei Lafreniere have said, no, I'm not going to play in Europe after I've been drafted. I'm going to train and get myself ready for when the New York Rangers need me, you know? So, and I would imagine guys like Stutzler and Byfield and Raymond are thinking the same things. It's like, yeah, we could go back home and play for Frölunda, or we could go play for Mannheim, or Lafreniere could go and play pretty much wherever he wants if he really wants to. Go play in the Swiss National League or you know, in the French League if he really wanted to. Go somewhere where he knows the language. But at the same time, it's like, those guys, you already know what you're getting out of them. So it's like, okay, we already know the kind of caliber of player they are. They don't need to go and refine their skills as much as, say, the late first-round picks. Like, what are your thoughts on all this, Chris? I've been rambling for a little while, but what are your thoughts?
No, it's all right. Yeah, I mean, as you said, I think it depends a lot on the player and their current situation, because I think particularly those guys high up in the first round that we mentioned, I mean, you know, they're going to be making the NHL rosters. So
yes.
They're definitely going to want to stay around. But at the same time, we've seen players who have been drafted by NHL sides, have come across to Europe and have played their whole career in Europe and never made it into the NHL.
Yep.
So it is difficult. I don't think anybody really knows what's going to happen. I mean, the NHL, as you said, they want to try and start on New Year's Day, and they want, for some reason, to try and get an 82-game regular season in. Let's play every other day, all for 4 months or whatever it's going to end up being. But I just don't. It's almost kind of an impossible one to call, but I think it's more. I think it's more dangerous for the European clubs who have got these players and know that at any minute they could go, rather than the NHL teams who know that they've got the pull on the players and say, well, look, we're the NHL side, come and play in the NHL. I think for the players who have that shot this year, I think at the drop of the hat, they'll go to the NHL. For the players who know that it will be a couple of years before they really get their chance, they may well put the argument in that it's better to stay in Europe, stay in a rhythm with a team and teammates that they now know, and keep developing as well as they can.
Yeah, I think obviously, like we said, it depends on player to player, especially the guys that are from Sweden, are from France, are from Finland. It's going to be much easier for them to make the transition back across the pond. They've more likely than not spent their entire development overseas anyways, which is kind of like, look, I just want to play until the NHL figures out what they're doing. And, you know, for most guys, that is the common sense thing to do because, say, for example, if the season doesn't go ahead, what if that is a potential scenario that does come out of this? Maybe things don't get better and the NHL decides, look, we're going to have to postpone this season. Like, we're not going to be able to run it. Do I think that's going to happen? Probably not. But you've got to think, obviously, Gary Bettman and the NHL, they're going to be looking at every single different avenue of what could potentially happen. And if the possibility of the NHL season doesn't run, then all of the players that didn't move overseas or didn't get ice time are like, oh, like, well, I've just missed out on a season of development. Yeah, like, I've been doing, like, my reps on the ice and stuff, but it's not the same thing. And then you've got, obviously, all of these highly touted prospects that were waiting for the call to go and play the NHL. They're left kind of like, oh, I should have gone back home to Mannheim and played. I should have gone back to Frölunda and carried on playing. So it's going to be interesting to see when the NHL actually does go ahead. I think the fact that we're seeing this huge influx of NHL prospects moving overseas, like we've mentioned in bonus clips before, it can only do good for international hockey and hockey as a sport, you know, like brings the highly touted prospects from North America over, get them some ice time, make them maybe a bit of a local hero with a lower tier league team, you know, why not? It's those fun things that happen and you've got the opportunity to become a good player for that team and get that ice time that you need. So it's going to be very interesting, and we just wanted to bring it up again because obviously the NHL announced that the start date is January 1st. They're hoping for, will games start on January 1st, or will it mean that that's when training camps begin or something like that? We'll, of course, have to wait and see. So there you go.